The UN Security Council has adopted a U.S.-sponsored resolution based on President Trump's 20-point peace plan for Gaza. And while there are concerns over parts of the resolution that mentions a possibility of a pathway to a Palestinian self-determination and statehood, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu welcomed yesterday's vote as an endorsement of the president's peace plan. Joining me now in studio to discuss this more is Carolyn Glick. She is the International Affairs Advisor to the Prime Minister of Israel. Carolyn was previously a senior contributing editor at the Jewish News Syndicate and a frequent guest on Washington Watch. Carolyn, welcome back to the program.
Thanks so much, Tony. It's great to be with you again here in Washington.
So let's talk about, let's start with the UN Security Council vote yesterday. This solidifies some things in terms of trying to bring peace to Gaza. What does this mean about the future of Hamas and their ability to be armed and in control of elements of Gaza?
So what it means is that Hamas has no future. The resolution, like the president's 20-point plan, makes clear that Hamas has to be dismantled and disarmed, and the population of Gaza has to be de-radicalized going forward. So I think from that perspective, we welcome the UN Security Council's embrace of Trump's plan, because we don't think that there's any prospect for peace in the region or between Israel and Gaza for the people of Gaza, so long as Hamas continues to exist and is armed and rules parts of Gaza. So I think that the 20-point plan that the president put forward, that is the basis of this resolution, I think that that is, in fact, the way forward, which is why Prime Minister Netanyahu is very supportive of this and working very closely with President Trump to implement his vision and his plan.
You know, there's been many attempts at peace in the Middle East. A lot of U.S. administrations have pursued this peace, right. and it's been, and look, I don't think there's anyone in here that wants peace more than the Jewish people who live in Israel. I mean, they want peace.
Oh, yes.
But that peace generally is short-lived because it's built on, I think, a false understanding of what really is going on. What is at the core of this, I would just say, hatred of the nation of Israel and the Jewish people?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that you're right. Peace you reach through strength. And Israel won this war along 7 fronts of Iran and all of its terror proxies in the region. And now it's just about who dismantles Hamas, who disarms Hamas. And so the resolution that was passed yesterday, like the president's 20-point plan, provides an alternative to the IDF doing it, to the Israeli military doing it with this international security force. And either they're going to be successful or not. And so when you ask, you know, why has peace eluded us? Why has peace not happened? What is the predicate for peace? I think it's Israeli strength and the defeat of our enemies. Because when you look at the creed of Hamas and of like-minded actors in the region, in Palestinian society, and throughout the world, their creed is hatred and annihilation and genocide in the name of, for Hamas, in the name of Allah. And that has to be defeated in order for there to be peace. And the only way that we know of to defeat it is through strength. Israel isn't going to convert anybody. That's not our way, and that's certainly not within our power. But what is within our power is divesting them of the notion that through their creed, they're going to move anywhere positive. And I think that that's really the main thing, is that you have to defeat the notion that their belief in annihilation is going to move anybody forward.
And I think that's why Israel still exists,
right,
in large part because you've done just that. But I want to go to Hamas. Hamas has rejected this plan.
Yeah.
They rejected
Well, they
the plan.
signed on to it, and then they rejected it afterwards when they realized that it was serious.
So does this wall off the element that Hamas controls of Gaza? I mean, is there really any expectation that this international force made up of primarily Arab and Islamic nations are actually going to take on Hamas?
Well, they're going to have an opportunity, and if they manage, great, and if not, fine. I mean, the problem for us is Hamas is not keeping the ceasefire. The ceasefire is not being honored at all by Hamas just today, and it happens every day. They breach it. They try to reach our forces. They want very badly to kidnap Israeli soldiers to reinstate the hostage drama, and they've already killed 3 hostages three of our soldiers since the ceasefire was announced last month. So they're not actually keeping the ceasefire. The people who are keeping the ceasefire are the IDF forces there that are blocking Hamas from reinstating hostilities by taking action against anybody who tries to cross the line to hurt them. But I think that, we have to bear that in mind. There's only one side that's faithful to the ceasefire, and that's as it always has been, is Israel.
You said that there was a 7-front war that you were fighting over the last 2 years. I would say there's probably an 8th front war, and that's been the media.
Absolutely. I mean, we saw just now with the BBC actually came out and said they lied about everything relating to Gaza. And it's not just the media. There's a whole complex of organizations.
Well, even on the right.
Everywhere, yeah.
I mean, we're seeing that among conservative talking heads and entities here in the United States.
Yeah, Israel's very concerned about it, frankly.
I want to go to something that is really at the heart of the issue for me, and I'll just be very candid up front. I have concerns about this UN security resolution, not because I don't want peace in the area. I want the Israeli people to live in peace. But I believe it's built on a faulty foundation by this promising, at least alluding to a pathway to a Palestinian state. And it's not specifically stated in here, but it's understood that they're talking about Judea and Samaria.
Right.
But the Prime Minister is very clear on that. There is no Palestinian state west of the Jordan.
Exactly. At Sunday's government meeting in Israel, the Prime Minister responded, because this also came out in a press release during the Jewish Sabbath on Friday evening, that there was going to be some sort of move towards establishing a Palestinian state, and he said flatly to the public, to the world, no. Israel's not going to accept the establishment of a Palestinian state west of the Jordan River. So
you would accept it elsewhere.
Sure. That's for
I mean, there's a lot of land.
Decide.
There's a lot of land out there, isn't there?
Well, we're not responsible for those lands, but
not on your land.
No. So look,
But I'm sorry. I don't want to cut you off. But I, for the benefit of our viewers and listeners, Judea and Samaria, which is the focus of this so-called two-state solution, is the heartland of Israel.
Look, I live in Judea. I live in the town of Efrat, which is south of Jerusalem, just across from Bethlehem. And that's where Rachel died. She died in Bethlehem on her way to Ephrata. That is where King David grew up. Right? That's where the story of Boaz and Ruth occurred in my neighborhood. So that this is where my children are being raised, where they're growing up, is where King David grew up. And that is extremely meaningful and important, because that really is the reason why we're in the land of Israel, because we're going home. Right. And so, for us, there's no question about that.
And those that are going back to Judea and Samaria are disproportionately the practicing Jewish people whose faith are real and vibrant, and they feel that they're being a part of fulfilling biblical prophecy.
This is true, but we have to remember that most Israelis are observant Jews. So it's not that, there's a major majority somewhere else that's different in kind from the Jews who live in Judea and Samaria. That's not true. Israel is a very religious nation. You don't necessarily always see that sort of...
you do it on Shabbat because everything's closed down.
Right. Well, no, I meant like in the media, you don't necessarily recognize that to be the fact, but Israeli society is very traditional. And so I think that, that's important to note. But, the issue of whether it would be possible to reach some sort of a coexistence west of the Jordan between Israel and the Palestinians from a political perspective, it used to be sort of a 60-40 question, 60% based on the experience that we've had with the Palestinian national movement said no, and 40 said yes, more or less, usually less, sometimes a little. That's like the peak support. But after October 7th, it became a 90-10% question, or 99-1%, because what we saw on October 7th really was that the most basic expression of Palestinian nationalism, such as it is the annihilation, the sadistic annihilation of the Jewish people and the Jewish state, and so it was a, to borrow a term, a come to Jesus moment. I mean, not literally, but I mean that Israelis saw. Well, you pray what you want. We don't pray that, but the Israeli people saw exactly what it meant. They were calling these.
The whole world should have seen it.
Well, we did, and what the world sees, the world sees. What we saw, we saw, and so, they can be placed, conditions on what they have to do in order to change. But we're talking about a fundamental transformation of how they view reality, how they view their place in the world, because what we've seen over the past 50, 100 years of Palestinian nationalism, so-called, is that it really is just a negation of Judaism and Jewish national self-determination and nothing else.
To be fair, there are Arabs living in and under the Palestinian Authority that don't want to be under them. They would rather be under the Israeli government.
This is true, but again, the question isn't even that. Yes, and that we live in peace with Arabs inside of Israel. 20% of Israeli society are Arabs. They're integrated into all walks of life inside of Israel. It's not like
there's a movement for these among some of the tribes, the families living in Judea and Samaria. The clans would prefer to have like an Emirates and be under Israeli government.
That's right. We have the Emirates plan going forward in the town of Hebron, where you have the sheikhs of the prominent clans in Hebron that want to separate from the Palestinian Authority.
Because they're corrupt.
Well, because they're corrupt and because they don't actually faithfully represent the Arabs of these areas. And we have the same thing happening in Gaza with a lot of these clans inside of Gaza that are trying to...
Is the media reporting on that?
I don't think so.
Yeah, because it shows the reality of what's happening on the ground there.
That's true. Look, I mean, what we've seen for the past 2 years, and really for so many years before October 7th, is that the media is playing a role here. They're not reporting news. They're creating a narrative of Israeli cruelty and murderousness, which is really reflective of the Palestinians, to try to change the way that people perceive Jews in Israel.
All right, we just have like a minute left, Carolyn, but that narrative from the media, in my view, and you can agree or not, but I think that's fueling the anti-Semitism that we see in the world.
I agree with you, and I think it's very disturbing, because I think that the idea of anti-Semitism is really not just a strike on the Jews, it's a strike on human freedom, and specifically on this country, on the United States, which has always been the leader of the free world since its inception, since before it was even established, when it was just an idea. And so, I think that Americans have to understand that they're being acted upon here by forces who want the United States to forget who it is, and that's something that really has to be fought. 30
seconds, Carolyn. Speaking to Christians here in this country, standing with Israel, is it more important to look at this as a biblical issue or a political issue?
I don't think that you can separate them when it comes to the Jews. Unfortunately or fortunately, I think that hatred of Jews is a spiritual disease. And I think that the stronger that people cling to faith in God, the more apparent that becomes to them. And so I think the closer that you are to what God wants us to do, the more obvious it is that Israel is what you have to stand with, on a moral level, on a spiritual level, and on a geostrategic level.
Carolyn, I stand with you and the Jewish people.
Thank you. God bless you. God bless America.